My name is Daniel, and you are listening to the Engineering Success Podcast, the premier engineering careers podcast. Whenever I was dreaming of becoming an engineer, I had one vision of what engineers do, and it involved a garage and startup companies that I had heard of and movies that I had watched. But boy, I was surprised whenever I got to engineering school and I started my classes and I started talking to actual engineers as I applied for engineering jobs. Engineers do a lot of things. The engineering degree is so versatile, and because of that, engineers do a lot more than just prototype new things. And that is why I started this podcast. Because if you told 12-year-old me what I do for a living now, my mind would have been blown. This is a podcast for aspiring engineers to learn more about what it's like to achieve an engineering career. Now, whether you're an experienced engineer, an aspiring engineer, or just trying to be an engineer, this is the podcast for you. Each week, hello, my name is Daniel, and this is the Engineering Success Podcast, episode 56. Hope you guys are doing well today. We're doing well. We just got back from a trip to San Antonio, which was nice. I got to see a lot of my work friends and friends, all around good times, good vibes. Baby E has hit the 7 month mark, and now they are trying to hold themselves up against things. Very exciting, but things are going well here. Before we get into the podcast, I need to give a big shout out to my top tier supporters. Thank you so much, Leroy Jenkins and John Ott, for your support of the podcast. With your help, I'm able to afford to keep my domain, which is www.engringsuccess.com, where you can email me at daniel@engringsuccess.com. For those of you that are watching in video format, you've been interrupted with a cat named Bailey, who's decided to make an appearance on this episode of the podcast. But again, thank you so much, John Ott and Leroy Jenkins, for your support of the podcast. I really appreciate you guys. If you have any questions, if you want to be featured on the podcast, if you want to buy media on the podcast, send me an email at daniel@engringsuccess.com and make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube and you're commenting in the comment section if you're watching on video format. Anyways, we have an interesting interview coming up here with Lane Kawaoka. Very good interview. I really enjoyed my conversation with Lane. We talk a little bit about finance and real estate, so we get a little bit into that jargon, but in there is a great story about his relationship to engineering, his pursuit of his engineering degree, and how he's applied his engineering mindset in the growth of his own business. So, hope you guys enjoy the conversation and you get something out of it. And as always, I'll catch you on the backside of this interview. All right, bye. My guest on today's podcast is a degreed engineer, podcaster, and thought leader in real estate investing under his brand name, The Wealth Elevator. Lane Kawaoka is a graduate of the University of Washington for both his undergraduate Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering and his Master's in Civil Engineering concentrated in Construction Management. After graduating, he held multiple roles in a 12-year career as an engineer for companies such as BNSF and the Hawaii Department of Transportation. But his passion is for real estate investing, and that is what he does now. His work includes managing a portfolio of more than 2.1 billion, yes, that's billion with a B, assets under management as a real estate syndicator for his Wealth Elevator Investor Club, providing financial advisory services and sharing advice and lessons learned from his career in real estate on his podcast, The Wealth Elevator. Lane has achieved a dream that I have had for a while by building a successful real estate portfolio, but then in true engineer's fashion, he chose not to sit on his portfolio and instead build a real estate empire. At least I'll say it's an empire. Today, I'm excited to learn more about Lane and his career journey, and I know that you guys will enjoy listening to his career story as well. Lane, thank you so much for your time today. How are you doing?
Hey, good. Happy to meet you, Daniel. Happy New Year, everybody. Aloha.
Yeah. Happy New Year. And yes, you're calling in from Hawaii, which also I'm jealous of that as well. So what was your week like this week, Lane?
It was busy, man. I traded, I always wanted to get out of the rat race, leave the day job, have, passive income to surpass daily expenses, but, you know, creating my own business, now kind of working for myself, I traded one rat race for the two rat race, as we call it in the entrepreneurial world. But a lot happier, I think, like, and kind of working for the man and, kind of doing the in the previous life is kind of what I say a lot of times.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you feel. I feel like if you do the things that you love, then it doesn't feel like. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's different schools of thought on that, but I feel like if you do what you love, then it doesn't feel at least as much as work, and you feel a little bit more. Uh, uh, Feeling more a little more inclined to do it. So here we're here to talk about your engineering journey and then your journey into doing what you do now. So how did you discover that you wanted to study engineering? And yeah, well, how did you discover that you wanted to study engineering?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to like elementary school, high school. I mean, I was always good at student. I mean, a little geeky. You know, I grew up here in Hawaii. I didn't surf. You know, I didn't really like that stuff. I was kind of more of like a, play on the computer, bookworm kind of guy. I suppose I was good at math and science as a kid, so I went down this track of, having an okay GPA, going through high school. And one day I just, what I graduated high school in 2003. So, there was Google back then, or at least not everybody used it, but I knew what was up, right? Not to
Yeah.
use MSN search. And I Googled like what is the most highest salary without going to all this extra college, right? Because I
Yeah.
was like, what? Like we're going to college. Yeah, we all knew that. But I was like, what? I got to go to like more college after that? Like what? What? Are you serious? Like more than 4 years? So that was the reason why I Googled that. And when you do that, as we all know, like it's all like computer engineer, mechanical, electrical, then civil, and then industrial is what I did eventually. But like that was I'm kind of motivated by money or maybe the end goal, and that was kind of the reason why I went down that path. And I kind of thought I would be going into engineering, but went to the University of Washington, and that was kind of the college years from there.
Yeah. So how did you end up choosing University of Washington and choosing that industrial engineering program that they have? Were there some important factors that you considered whenever choosing that university?
It was the best school I got into. They say pick two reachers, two easy ones, and two, surely you should get ins. That was the best one I got into. To be honest, that was away from my parents,
Yeah.
away from Hawaii. Little did I notice it's cold and dreary out there, and I kind of stuck it out for a long time up there. But I mean, USC Washington was a general school. They had bunch of engineering programs and business and all kinds of stuff. So it wasn't like going and being pigeonholed into like a school that just had good engineering. And not gonna lie, and I think there's gonna be a theme in this interview is I had a good I was in Seattle, wasn't in the middle of nowhere, and I had a good party. It was a decent party school, and why you go to college, I think. I mean, looking back, I didn't really learn too much in college that I apply to today or even in my career. But you know, getting into college, the first couple years, the way it worked in there's like you go through all like the normal intro classes, that your maths, your chemistries, your physics. Oh my goodness, and you you have to apply in the sophomore year to get into your school. So of course, I call this kind of the bookshelf. Like on the top shelves are your better or more competitive degrees, such as what was it, electrical engineering. Oh, chemical engineering is at the top. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, that's the hardest one. And then you have computer, mechanical, civil. So I I wanted to move back to Hawaii. I don't know where that idea came from, just because I wanted to move back home eventually, which actually did end up happening because I wanted to be warm. And in Hawaii, you have a lot of civil engineering because the military's out here, so you
Hmm.
got like good government jobs. So I kind of started out as mechanical and civil was the idea. And part of this was like the first quarter, I just got blown out of the water with like they make you do computer science engineering, and
Oh man.
it's like what is this? Like who are these people?
I could
Uh,
never do it. Yeah.
I was always like maybe top 20% in my high school class, but I quickly realized what a curve is and how I was slightly at the lower of the crest.
Yeah.
Wasn't horrible, but like, man, like it kind of puts you in your place, right? And throughout the years, I had a rough like or second or third quarter of freshman year, and we were doing, I did AP calculus in high school,
Yeah.
and it allowed me to kind of skip a couple of quarters. But I wish I didn't do that because I wish I would have repeated because that would have padded my GPA. So that was kind of silly. I mean, I get it. Everybody wants to skip and save money. But in this case, it hurt me because you need to get those easy classes done for you because you've done it before to pad your GPA to be able to apply for these colleges, these once you're into the college
Your
later on.
major, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't have that opportunity, so I kind of got like beat up in GPA wise. So my aspirations of going mechanical engineering, civil engineering, kind of went away, and because you really need to have like a mid three
Yeah.
five GPA, and I was like in the low threes, and there was a while there where like freshman year that summer, where it's like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it. And of course, like most of my buddies who had aspirations of being in college, exactly what they tell you. Half of them drop out or, go to, some other easier degree and, don't make it. And this is where sophomore year I've discovered industrial engineering because it was easier to get in. Let's all not kid ourselves here. But like there was like a one seminar I did, and like they brought in the guy from Starbucks, and who doesn't like Starbucks, right? Well, maybe not today, but back then they were cool, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember that was when Howard Schultz was like in there, and like one of my friends from college, she interned there, and she was like, "Yeah, I see Howard all the time. Yeah, he talks to me all the time, as an intern." So that was the
So
cool days
cool.
of Starbucks. But they came in, they talked about like, like time studying, and like how they did like the drive back then. They didn't have the drive-throughs, but they were testing the drive-throughs, and I was like, "This is cool. This is exactly what I like because I'm more of a systems process
Yeah.
guy. I'm pretty. I can be a little anal in terms of like optimizing things. I like things kind of clean and orderly. People know about like Kaizen. I think it's 5S where sort, organize, and it was kind of up my alley. And part of that, I think you're gonna see a theme here too. Like when I got into the workforce, I just like to get my stuff done and go, right? So
Yeah.
efficiency is a big part of what I like to do for really the end goal. So that I went down that track, and I luckily got in. And once you're into college, you're able to kind of cruise for a couple of years. I eventually graduated and went to work for BNSF Railway. I don't know if I should say the name. I don't know. Screw it. I'm not going to go back to work for them again or ever again or any really other company, I guess, suppose again. So I might as well say it. But they were not a traditional, like most of my friends were going like Boeing, right? It's kind of boring was kind of the joke
Okay.
back then.
Yeah. That's like up in Bellevue, right? That's where they have a office up there.
Yeah, they're all over up there, and then now
Yeah.
they kind of moved a lot of their guys out to South Carolina, where we kind of thought to invest in apartments out there before that matter. But that was I started to work for them for a couple of years. I got paid a good salary, not gonna lie,
Yeah.
and that's why I went there. Again, motivated by money, and I went with them because I didn't think I could cut it in terms of engineering. And this is kind of my last engineering story in school that I remember because I don't remember it very much. But like in the like the classes where you had like five problems for homework for that week,
Yeah.
um, and each problem takes like two freaking pages to like write down your work and do it. Like, is there like
Yeah.
massive problems? Well, I could never do any of that stuff, like the mechanical engineering, civil engineering, like that, that spider web. problem where you have like this spider web at this angle and this
Yeah.
spider web, and then the spider's 2 kilonewtons or kilograms. This is such
Yeah.
a stupid thing. Like, when does this ever come up, right? In
Yeah.
life. I still can't figure that damn thing out today. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, where you sum up the forces in the X and Y axis. Like, I still can't do that. But like, I would be the guy kind of going around in the library brokering out the questions. So what I would do is I would quickly run out and do the easy one. I would take the easy one. I'm gonna broker it to like the next one of the harder ones,
I'll
and I would
help you
have,
with this one.
yeah, and then I would go to the other kids across, the library or later on in the week, and then like trade. So that I would like pretty much do that to get the 5 questions for the homework. And then obviously get blown away by the final exam and midterms, which was
Yeah.
pretty much 80% of your grade. But that was the way I just got through it, man. I mean, like, I mean, but at least I knew that of myself, to know
Yeah.
that I wasn't a very good engineer. And what do you do when you're not good at testing technical and engineering? Well, you go to project management, and that's what I did. So I went to work for the railroad, something super basic and easy,
Yeah.
and I got put into their. I think I got lucky, and I got put into the management trainee world, and they're a big Fortune, I think 50 company at the time. They give their employees a lot of responsibility. So like, I was given like right out the gate like a 40-50 man crew to supervise and be like the first officer. It kind of
Yeah.
works like the military a little bit. I think I would have been like a lieutenant, where I have like a
Yeah.
foreman working for me, and then all the guys. A lot of responsibility in terms of like dollars and like, manpower. And like, if we messed up and there was a delay, like, man, there was hell, because like, like, all these trains are like $1 gazillion each, and you're delaying them, and like, it
Yeah.
very little on the engineering side though.
You got some really good hands-on experience that I imagined was at least helped you, and you got to deal with money. So those were things that were interesting to you. So you interned with BNSF before you started working with them full time, right? So what was that process like? How'd you get your foot in the door with them before going to work with them full time?
Oh, that was the honeymoon stage. Yeah, they sent us all around, and like,
Yeah.
like, I thought it was crazy. Like, there was like this rule where like, if you're away from the home office more than 30 miles, you get like free lunch and dinner. And they're like, yeah, just stay over to the hotel here, and they wanted us to see all the, travel and see all parts of the system.
Yeah.
And that was cool because, again, motivated by money, I just didn't want to spend mine and save my own money, right? So I thought that
Yeah.
was cool at the time. Little did I know that it was a trap. It was a trap to get us to stay with them, because
Yeah.
BNSF stands for Better Not Start a Family, and quality life with them is horrible. But
Yeah.
I don't know, let's tell it how it is, right? Like, this was being made quickly to me, like the second month of management trainee. Like, the management trainees, we would be like, wait a minute, we're gonna be on the road like more than half of the time. I was on the road for like my first, I think, like 6 years. I didn't have a home office.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that story later, how I didn't live anywhere. But the and as a career path, you're expected to move every year or two,
Hmm.
which was great. I didn't have a family at the time, but like, um I just kind of rolled it out. It was a good job. It paid me a good amount of money. And this was during 2008, right? 2009. So like, I was just
You
kind
had
of lucky.
stability. Yeah.
I had a job where some of my buddies were getting laid off from college. But, now we're kind of bringing in my other alternative life here as the investor. Like, I was always frugal growing up. I grew up in a family where, you save money and you don't buy soft drinks and stuff like that at restaurants. That's a waste of money. And, with a 6-figure salary, I was able to save like 30, 40 grand every single year
It's
from it.
amazing.
And up until that point, I was kind of programmed by the system to invest in the 401k because my parents told me to do it. In fact, even in my teens, I had a Roth IRA from a summer job. Like I knew about that stuff. And through
Awesome.
college and even through high school, like I would like read Kiplinger's magazine and Money magazine. I don't think they have Money magazine nowadays, but like who the heck does that, right? Like I was kind of a kooky kid back then. And so I knew about like Roth IRAs, all these backdoor strategies that like people think are cool, but I think are kind of lame today. But going into a career, I knew 401k, get the match, and you save your money. There's all these money hacks and stuff like that. The credit cards, hacking. In fact, in my right after college when I started working, back then, you can't do this now, but I would get all these like I'd apply for all these credit cards and all in one day. And they would call this the Aparama, where I would apply for like a dozen credit cards and just rack up all this minimum balance.
Yeah.
And back then they had these 0% balance transfer offers where you could literally, if you had a $20,000 credit line, you could get a $20,000 check and not have to pay any money for that balance transfer. And it was on a 0% interest rate for 12 or maybe even 18 months.
Yeah.
So I must have got like maybe like 60 grand, 70 grand of like money in my bank account. And what I would do is I would put it into a rewards checking account, which again, this is back in like 2007, 2006 time, I think. Those things weren't really available. And what a pain in the butt those things are because you have to do like 12 transactions a month and they're all kind of different and you can't. I mean, I'm a smart guy, so I was like, I'm just gonna do my dinky 1%, 1 cent transactions on PayPal. Then I
Oh
got
my
banned for
gosh.
doing that, right? And then I had to, eventually, you go buy bubble gum, but that takes too long to do at the store. So eventually, I figured out that I could go to the gas station and do like a 18-cent transaction, turn it off, put it on. Um, then it gets banned too, and then I learned that you can only do three at a time and you got to space it out and it's like super cold and like this is like the cheapo stuff I used to do. If people go to my old website, I think it's at simplepassivecashflow.com/cheapo, there's all these lists of things I would be doing to save money.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes, I think, when you're under $1 million net worth. You got to do these scrappy things because it is a game of inches. It's really all what you can save in terms of your delta, what you make minus what you save. And I took that money and I bought a house to live in, which back then I thought that was what you're supposed to do, right? Get on that wealth elevator to get moving or escalator. What obviously now I don't know, I don't think buying a house to live in is the right for a lot of the people listening here. Now, buying a house to live in is a forced piggy bank. Most people are really bad with their money, so they need that forced piggy bank, and that's what a house is. So for most people, buying a house to live in. But I think if most of you guys out there are pretty conscientious with your money, positive network savers, you save at least 10 grand plus a year, you're better off investing it in real estate or other investments. But I didn't know that, right? Like I bought a house to live in, and this is a couple years after college, 2009. I bought my house to live in, and I was there like never because I had this silly job that took me all around the country, and I was only home on Saturdays, and it was kind of stupid. Yeah, I kind of thought about it,
Yeah.
and it was cool for a little bit because I was like, yeah, none of my, nobody I knew had a house, right? Yet, right? Usually that comes 10 years later. And I also again like that money making friend upstairs for me said like this is a waste of money. You should just rent this thing out, make some money. And this coincided with I took a job that was 100% on the road, and I worked this job actually for like I think I was on the road for like 4 or 5 years after it too. So
Wow.
I can remember the day where I was like, yeah, let me just call up my old landlord and ask how to do this. And she was a property manager. Little I didn't know that the property manager just pretty much does everything. They also take like 50 to 100% of your first month's rents as, kind of a fee, and then they take 10% of the monthly revenue that you get.
Yeah.
All in all, good deal, especially for somebody who, is busy, busy working professional. And I took that deal, and I remember like coming home from Montana. I drove all the way back to Seattle, and I got home, and it was a long weekend, and I just threw all my stuff in a thing, and I organized like a Craigslist sale. People came to the house, bought all my stuff, and everything else I just threw into a storage locker, and I went there for the next several years, and I lived on the road, and my
Wow.
savings went up from like 30 grand to like I think I was saving like well over 80 or maybe even 100 grand a year. Who knows? But all that went into buying more and more properties. So I bought another duplex in South Seattle. And then I was learning about this concept of rent to value ratio. So engineers will love this. So the rent to value ratio is a quick and dirty way of evaluating the property that you're going to buy. So what you want is a rent to value ratio of 1% or higher. So you find this ratio by taking the monthly rental price, dividing it by the purchase price of the property. So that first property I bought, I think it went rented for like 2,100 a month, and then divided by the purchase price was like, let's just call it 350. So as you
Yeah.
can see, well below the 1%
Yeah.
value. And I didn't know any better, right? Who knows? And if you guys are engineers, you guys can go to like the new website and get the full analyzer spreadsheet for free. I think it's thewealthelevator.com/analyzer or thewealthelevator.com/turnkey. But that was a lot of, I would buy these single family homes, just, put 20% down payment and then rinse, wash, repeat, put it, get a professional property manager that takes care of all that BS and, get somebody in there. And this is where I realized that Seattle, Washington, kind of like California and Hawaii are known as more primary markets. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to invest in those types of areas because the numbers don't work. You're going to find better rent to value ratios in more secondary markets. And that was where I started to buy properties in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis. And no, I didn't see the dang things. I'm buying commodities, and I have
Yeah.
professional property managers who are boots on the ground. So that's what I did. I sold some of the Seattle rentals, and this is, in parallel working my job. I had, um, yeah, 2015. I had 11 of these rental properties out there, and maybe
Yeah.
getting an extra. Each rental, you get maybe a few $100s of passive cash flow. This is your rents minus your mortgage and then all the
Yeah.
expenses like insurance, the tent's always going to break your property to some extent. 10-20% of your rents are going to go to that on a infrequent basis. But that was kind of that was a big checkpoint. Yeah, 2015, having 11 rentals, still working the engineering job at that time.
Yeah, so at that point in time, you were with BNSF still. You were a project engineer. You had, I guess, grown in from being just a first line supervisor, applying all that stuff. I think at this point in time, you'd even gone back and gotten a master's in construction management somewhere, which
Yeah.
which is funny to me because you said engineering. Why do you have to do more school? But then you went back and did more school anyways. Why'd you go back and do more school?
I mean, this is just how sick and twisted I am, right? Like I am, I'm working on the road, I'm in a hotel all the time, and I'm
Yeah,
just a little bored at night. Sure, I do my investing, knowledge learning and looking for
yeah.
deals, but I'm just like, this was must have been like 5 years into like my career. I'm like, I got some time, I'm not married, I don't got kids, and if they're gonna like let me read this straight, right? Like if you're gonna pay for my master's and I just gotta stick around for 2 years. Yeah, sure, why not? Right. So I took the online degree for it took me 3 years to do. And okay, I don't want to talk down on people who have online degrees, but in my opinion, it's it's silly. Like I didn't learn. Well, I learned some useless things about like permeable asphalt and scaffolding, which wrote a paper on scaffolding.
Nice.
But like the flow was, I would read something and I would write a paper. Man, with AI, that would have been so easy. And then I would write some stupid thing on a form with the classroom to for some
Yeah.
interactions. You get graded on that. And then some of the classes you go and do a proctored exam for it. And it was like just a couple classes every quarter, throughout the time for 3/4 a year, and there was no interaction with the professor or students. It was crazy. And I think schools like to do this because I think it's just a way of extracting money from people like employers like how I had, right, who
Yeah.
would pay for their people. And because it's easy money for them, they don't have to like, use any of the facilities. I mean, and it's scalable, right? I mean, I do this with my investor mastermind program, like the group coaching thing. It's kind of scalable, right? Like when
Yeah.
you use technology in this way. Um, and I'm I'm not a huge fan of academics in colleges these days, obviously, because I'm a entrepreneur, and it is what it is. But um, you know, you I remember I went to like the graduation, and I was like, I don't know anybody here. And then there was like a group of them, and they all like hugging, and like I'm like kind of like felt like the odd guy out because like I never saw any of y'all people,
Yeah.
and but I didn't learn a dang thing that I carried over. I went to the work the next day, and nothing changed. I didn't get a
Yeah.
raise. But if I would have stayed in that career path, yeah, sure, I'm sure that would have helped, right? But I don't think it's as necessary in your blue collar type of engineering fields, such as civil engineering, mechanical engineering. I could be wrong, but um, I just thought of a way of just getting extra fringe benefits from the company. And um,
Maximizer.
yeah, exactly, right. Like I'm always trying
Yeah.
to find like kind of and mindset wise, like I call that like scarcity mindset. I think it's great, right, when you're under $1 million, $2 million net worth. But for a lot of my clients and myself, like I try and consciously try to open up. And like money is like it flows through your fingertips like sand in time. And if you don't spend it and you don't convert it into experiences and memories, then what good is it? Money comes and goes. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I would, good book recommendation is Die with Zero, with Bill Perkins. We had him on my podcast. He's a great guy, like
Wow.
very, very intelligent. But that definitely changed my life here recently, trying to not be such a miser and penny pitching, and like, be more abundant, because most people like to hang out with, abundant mindset people.
Yeah.
But granted, like what I've realized for myself, until I became a credit investor, net worth plus million, plus, like it's kind of like that what they tell you in the airplane. Like unless you can put your own oxygen mask on
Mhm.
first and get to safety, get to financial freedom, then it's hard to kind of work on these, feel the security to kind of open up and spend the money, right, that you so preciously worked for to this
Yeah.
time. Because jumping back to the timeline, man, I was working my butt off, right? And like I didn't have the early 20s where I went to happy hour with my friends because I'm in like Forsyth freaking Montana, or like
Yeah.
like in the middle of nowhere. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um
You were with BNSF for 8 years, and you were working in the middle of nowhere. But then eventually, this is that around that 2015 timeline, you decide to leave, and you end up pursuing, I'd say, a series of shorter stints in construction. Maybe with that fancy construction management degree, but at the same time, you decided to also start your podcast and your platform. And I'll be honest, I mean, at this point, you have your 11 rentals, you have a great engineering career. Well, you may argue it's not as great because you're not stable because you're traveling all over. But you land this job with the city of Kirkland. You're I guess semi stable. Um, and by a lot of people's standards, that's I feel like that's making it for a lot of people. You have the passive income, you have a good job, but you wanted more. So why more?
Yeah, I mean there are a couple of like lead ups to that. Like first, like working for like the company, like I realized this concept of like red circling employees. So like what large companies will do is they'll identify certain people as future leaders of the company and push them up through the ranks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was not one of those people. Maybe because I was too busy thinking about my own money and personal finances than the company's, putting them first. But hey, that's my bad, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I realized like I was not one of these like rocket ship career path people. And that kind of, I think that further accelerated like my passion into this other avenue, right?
Hmm.
I would implore people right now to like think really, what is your business? You know, some people think it's their job, their career.
Hmm.
I would argue that it's you and your family, and personal finances is number one. Your job is just a means to get money, which you need to turn into investments for the sake of your damn family and yourself. Don't don't lose sight on who is number one. And some people will say that's a little bit selfish, but you know what? Like if you've moved jobs a couple of times, your company doesn't give a damn about you. And part of this is like yeah, I mean, yeah, this is part like one of the big stories that kind of changed my life was, I had a crew when I first started, and we had a lot of young guys too. Like, I was in my early 20s. We had a lot of guys in the younger 20s, and we are kind of the oddball crew at the time. And fast forward when I had kind of the desk job, I can remember, you know, people tend to die in a 40,000 employee, 50,000 employee company. People, there's always one or two people that die a year from some train related accident or out in the
Yeah.
field. And yeah, sure enough, one of them was a guy that worked for me. What are the odds, right? And I personally remember the guy, and I knew at the time, he's in his early 20s. He had like a couple kids or a few kids, and I was like, it was business as usual. Like, and like my
Wow.
bosses didn't care, and why would they, right? Because it's a big company. That was, we were in Seattle. That dude was in like Minnesota or whatever, and it really like, I mean, it was like put things in perspective for me. It's like, here this guy busts his butt, traveling in his early 20s for this company, and he just gone, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. And that's kind of where I realized how, in a way, heartless, but hey, it's business, right? And I, yeah, I mean that maybe that was the thing that drove the rift. And then, but I do know around that time, I had the 11 rentals. More importantly, I had like $3,000 of passive cash flow coming in a month. And I realized that, wow, that's like, I'm getting paid more after tax because not only the 30 grand, but I'm like saving a lot of money on taxes because of the depreciation and losses from the real estate is helping out my personal tax side. And I'm like making more than my boss or my boss's boss. So why the hell would I want to bust my butt to go for those promotions to get 10, 20% more pay to get a lot more BS in terms of workload when I could just buy another rental property, which I've done, right? So it just made no sense to me at that point. Sure, in the beginning, one, two rental properties was like is not much leverage, but I was getting to the point where there was pretty much hockey stick growth or getting there. Of course, I learned that rental properties is not a good way for really busy people, and syndications and private placements as a passive LP partner is really the way to go if you're kind of already mid-career path and a lot more busier with a family. But I kind of walked through work with a different attitude, right? Like it was kind of like an FU attitude, and people call this the term originated from Microsoft. Um, FU, I think I forget the acronym, but like basically the early guys in Microsoft, they got paid, right? Those guys, they had like options, and there was an acronym FU. I'm fully vested. Um, and but for me, it was kind of the same concept, right? Like I would walk through work, and it would be like, screw you guys, I make more than you and the boss's boss. And why, like one day they were like, they came to me and they're like, oh, you don't understand. And in this company, it was very old school. Like you would sit, it was very conservative, and that's my fault for working for them. But you you go into a meeting and you sit next to your boss and you don't say anything unless you are asked a specific question.
Wow.
And if your boss is there, you're not saying a dang thing. You do not say anything. And
Hmm.
that's just how that company rolled. And it was very much like, looking back, I learned a lot of things. Don't get me wrong. I'm running my own company, and like, and sometimes I actually like got to catch myself because I can tend to be a little bit. more conservative in terms of my management practices. But I learned a lot of systems and processes of what the big guys, the Fortune 50 companies do, and I emulate today. Um, so it wasn't all bad, but at the time, a younger self of mine saw it as, this sucks. I want to. I don't need to get paid very much. So this was a cool intermediate point where I was working for private, like I said, and I took pay cuts to work for, states, governments. And I eventually worked for, that was the city, then I worked for the state of Hawaii, then I actually worked for the federal government. So I hit all the government entities, right? And,
Yeah.
which are typically known as a little bit more laid back. Um, when I love working for the city because I actually kind of fell in love with the coworkers and the people again. And I talk about this with a lot of my clients that are in work jobs, right? Like, because a lot of it is, happiness. I call it the triangle where, you need to, the triangle pieces are, you need to like what you do for work, and then the boss that you work with, and then your coworkers or your employees below you. You can have a one of them not really that great, but if you can have two, you'll be there a while. If you only got one, then you kind of probably should look for the next thing. But when I was working for the private company, I didn't like who I worked for. I didn't really like what I did. I didn't want to travel, and my coworkers were kind of jerks and cutthroat. And then when I went to the city, I didn't really like what I did still, but the bosses were cool. They treat us like people. Granted, we didn't have to do much too, but so I guess it kind of made it easy. And then like the coworkers, the coworkers were cool. Right, it was a great community, and I hit two of the three there. And so this could have went on for a really, really long time. If I didn't start that podcast back in 2016 and grow this community and have to kind of quit my job to take over it, I probably would have been super happy just kind of kicking back at my government job, and obviously my passive income would have gotten much much higher.
Yeah.
Um, didn't have kids till later, so maybe that would have been the trigger for me to leave the W-2 day job. But I think for a moment there, I mean, I was kind of living the dream in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
So what was the what so you, yeah, you worked for the city of Kirkland as a project engineer for a couple years, then you got to move back to Hawaii to be you get to achieve that goal and be around your family, and then you stayed in Hawaii for another job, and then eventually in 2019, then you quit your engineering job to go full time on real estate. What was the moment that you realized that you could leave the industry altogether?
Well, it was more I had to because in 2016, I started the podcast. 17, 18, it got traction. And then we developed like an investment club because there's a lot of, people who are looking for syndicated deals out there to invest in, but they don't know the people. And that was kind of the role I played because I had this internet persona, and I
Hmm.
was also pretty experienced. And then we started to operate apartment complexes,
Wow.
and I mean, we were raising millions and millions of dollars. Today, we've raised over, like, people have given us $200 million. It's just, to me, absurd, right? Like, people you meet on the internet just give us money. And but at the time, 2019, we were already starting to get that traction, and it was very. I look back at those days, it was a little irresponsible of myself because here I am working a day job. Granted, I'm only doing like an hour work, and then I have my computer, and I'm like, I got my iMac, and I'm literally like swiping to my other job, which is got super busy because we're bringing in people's money, right? And that's what I
Mm.
mean as I felt really guilty because here I am kind of working two things. I needed to focus on
Mhm.
people managing people's money and the investments. Um, but that's a transition. A lot of people and a lot of engineers are kind of investors and operators where they'll buy rental properties or apartments on the side as they work their day job. But to me, like, we wanted to take this more professional and like focus on it, right? As opposed to, syndicating real estate deals. And yeah, this is just a side gig of mine, I got my IT job, whatever. We wanted to take it more like institutional. And in 2020, we kept I realized that I wasn't, I came from the engineering field. I'm an industrial engineer. I'm a smart guy, can make systems and processes, but I was never a property manager myself, living in the trenches for a decade plus. And that was where I realized, through some coaching and self-awareness myself too, that we needed to hire other people who have done this role and can do it a lot better than myself. And that was kind of the creation of a company, right? Like,
Oh,
and I realized that, being more of the principal of the company, my role is more hiring and guiding and deal flow and, talking to investors and, just, and it's crazy. We have to be kind of a good steward of people's money. But a lot of what I learned prior to was, in terms of like working with difficult conversations with employees, just working with people, so much, workload, email correspondences that really helped me. Um, and then it was funny enough, like, we would take over properties, rehab it, new flooring, new appliances, new paint job, renovate it, sell it, in, several year timeline. But eventually we kind of moved up kind of the ladder to developing brand new workforce housing.
oh,
And I once again found myself in a situation where, back then I would build railroad, um, I was more on like the horizontal construction side
yeah.
instead of the vertical.
Vertical.
I
Yeah.
did a little bit, had some stairwells here, had to go to the building department and get some stuff. So I kind of knew, but also realized it's kind of similar, right? The process
Yeah.
with the horizontal, especially when you're the owner's rep, like how I was most of my career.
Yeah.
And I find myself in the same dang role in a way, right? Here we are, we're
Yeah.
building this 300 unit apartment complex in Huntsville, Alabama, and you have reviews, you have pay estimates, and
Uh-huh.
we have construction management that once again I'm the manager of, and they're managing the contractor, our scope,
Yeah.
schedule, budget. Same dang role, except like, I mean, I don't want to say on a recorded thing how much money we make, but like if anybody wants to work for us for a couple hundred grand and you're willing put your diligence into it, dude, you're selling yourself way short. Like the real money is made on the principal owner investor side, whether you're an investor in the deal or like us as the operators. And then it just kind of hit me. It's like, man, when I was a construction manager role, kind of building somebody else's dream, they were making like 50, 100,000 times more than I made. And I was the person who put that thing together for them. And but unless you can, get several $1 million together, either syndicate it from other investors or have it yourself, which you probably wouldn't be working your damn job anyway.
Yeah.
That's how it is. But then I realized, like, all right, this is what college is for, because as we hire construction managers or directors of construction, superintendents, that's what college does, is creates these people just like myself. And it allows us to interchangeably like get these people. And I think that's, I come in from a different perspective what people get paid these days. It's more like how easy is it to replace you? Doesn't matter how good you are at your job. It's how easy is it to place you? And it's kind of easy to replace a superintendent or construction guy, white collar engineer, construction engineer. It's pretty easy for me to replace him. And that's unfortunately why they don't get paid
Mhm.
multiple six figures.
Yeah. So you talk about real estate syndication. So syndication, I'll be honest, is a word that it wasn't in my regular vocabulary before I started interviewing you. So maybe give a brief overview of what real estate syndication is, what your investor club is, and what the average person is that's involved with what you do.
Yeah, I mean, so the analogy I use is kind of like an airplane. So in an airplane, you have the co-pilots and pilots that fly the plane. No, that's called the general partnership, essentially. They're, so they kind of do everything. They source the deal, they get all the investors, and then the investors are like the people who come in to coach. They put down, normal minimums in our ecosystem are like 50, $100,000 minimums. Obviously, that
Nice.
sounds like a lot of money, right? That's a huge amount, I think, for average person. But then again, a lot of investors that we work today aren't super high net worth, right? Maybe one, the $5 million net worth, and more importantly, they save, fifty to $100,000 a year. They make as a household 300 grand, and they save, the diligent savers just like I was, and they spend 200 and they have a net 100, and they'll place 50, 100 grand into these deals every year. And a lot of people, they realize that the retirement 401k isn't the best vehicle because you're stuck in Wall Street products. And
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is invest directly with the operator and to cut out all these silly middlemen. And that's really what's the issue, I think, with traditional investing. Um, what we teach today is more like, investing in these direct deals to get, better returns, obviously, but then it unlocks the passive losses that you can use to play all these more advanced strategies with taxes. This makes 401ks, Roth IRAs, kitty stuff. And this is where, like, if you're thinking of spearheading your net worth into outer space, getting to financial freedom, going weightless, it's in a way it's kind of removing that friction, the air friction, getting there, right? Like if I mean some, even without investing, sometimes we can save people maybe 30% on their taxes right away. And it's all about your net worth growth. And then we
Mhm.
also do, a concept called infinite banking, where you kind of bank on yourself and you kind of generate returns there, which are some of your liquidity. But this trifecta strategy is, what I realize, something I kind of haphazardly kind of pieced together myself. And then when I started to meet other accredited higher net worth investors, this is a very basic um, best practice suite. And what I've realized, it expedites things about a third of the time to where you think you can get there. Most of our clients, they think that they can get the retirement by their late 50s, but this just brings it way up to maybe the 40s there if you start in your 30s. And that's what it's all about, right? Like money allows you, to do what you want um, on your terms. And if you like your engineering job, cool, right? If you like the people, awesome, keep doing it. But maybe at least get to that point where I was in 2015, where you're kind of walking around, not in eggshells, but kind of like, yeah, go ahead, fire me. I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna do my job the way I want to do it. The not out of fear, but out of what I think is right. Run meetings how I want, say what I want, do what's best for the client or what's best I think the job is. Um, and I think that's a better lifestyle. Money doesn't solve all problems, but it sure makes it like a lot easier. And I think that's what we teach. The strategies and but I think what's hard is a lot of people, they don't have the money for that, and they may have to start on the lower rungs. And this is kind of like the book that I wrote was the Wealth Elevator, where there's these different floors of the wealth elevator. As I kind of went through my journey just in the last hour, you kind of realize that if you're under $1 million net worth, or especially under $500,000 net worth, just buy little rental properties like how I did. But if you're already making, you're already an accredited investor making more than $250,000 a year, you step up to syndications and private placements. But then now the problem is, well, who the heck do I invest in, right? There's all these yo-yos running around syndicating deals. Well, that's where you need a community, right? And, that's essentially what I've kind of taken pride over these last several years. We do an annual retreat. This year we're doing it in Vegas. Normally we do it in Hawaii, but it's this community of core, good, hardworking, six-figure earners at their jobs, and but secretively on the side, just like how I was, they're investing in these syndications and private placements. And what you realize when you find yourself a good few buddies, it's a very small ecosystem out there doing this stuff.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and how how engineering has kind of contributed to where you are. It sounds like maybe even though you've had an interesting relationship to engineering, it still is a big part of what you do now today. Could you just close by giving any advice that you'd have for a young person that is considering pursuing engineering? Would you still recommend they pursue it, or what do you think?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you need money to get yourself off the ground, and a job can be a great way of doing it, especially if you've already kind of, I mean, people, I guarantee people listening here have already probably sunk 5, 10, 15 years into that path. And So maybe don't see it as a long-term play, but more of an intermediate checkpoint, right? Like as soon as you can save 20, 30 grand, go buy a rental property with 20, 30% down payment. If you're already $250,000 making a year, maybe jump up to that second floor of the wealth elevator, which is syndications and private placements as a passive investor. But like I remember, like, what is the business? Like, what is your focus? Your focus is on yourself, not your company, not your career. I mean, the career is just a path, a means to get there. That said, at one time in my younger days of building the Wealth Elevator podcast, I kind of foo-fooed on my engineering world, and as I kind of saw me look at it, like a lot of the skills that I've learned today, dealing with people, leadership, and then the analytical skills I use today, um, it was kind of learned through the job, my first job, and how do you get the job, but you have to go through this rigor of college education to get it. Unfortunately, that's the way society works. Learn the rules of the game, I think, is what we hear a lot about. And that, but what I'm telling everybody is the rules of the game is to get money to invest in investments to get yourself financially free. And those investments are not the traditional Wall Street garbage, the 401ks, mutual funds, stocks, and stuff like that. Um, Sometimes it does well, but the tax on the taxes side, that's where real estate kind of trumps it. Um, but yeah, I mean, if like my kids, yeah, go to college, guys, and work a job. Also, because when you get to financial freedom, when you finally, your passive investments income surpasses your ordinary income needs or what you made at your day job, it is so much sweeter when you do it yourself and you get
Yeah.
there. Unfortunately, my kids will just be trust fund kids, so whatever. But I mean, but that's also why, like, this is a big thing we do within our community is I think a lot of people listening are probably, because y'all are working, are probably just like myself, first generation potential millionaires. The second generation would be my kids. They're trust fund kids, but they're good kids because I'm the one badgering them this stuff all the time, right?
Yeah.
But it's always that third generation is the one that, I'll be dead by that time and I don't have influence. And if I don't teach my kids the right things of alternative investing, taxes, these legal stuff and investing in alternative investments, they're not going to be equipped with the knowledge, which is, I think, the most important thing, these alternative investing skills to teach their kids. So, that's where they're going to give their kids everything that they want because I gave them a boatload of money to do it. And that's why 90% of wealth leaves families in 2 to 3 generations. So you may not care about that, but it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. No, I've heard stories talking to friends that they've seen their families go through similar things, and yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. Well, I know we're running out of time on your end, so thank you so much, Lane, for sharing your story and for your advice on pursuing an engineering career. And I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to staying connected with you.
Yeah, yeah. If yeah, email address lane@thewealthelevator.com if anybody wants to reach out, need some help.
All right. Thank you so much, Lane. Thank you so much for listening to that episode of the Engineering Success Podcast. If you listened all the way through, it must have meant that you liked something about it. So make sure you like, if you're watching on video format, leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll read it out on the next episode of the podcast. And also, please do consider supporting the podcast on Spotify or on Patreon. I really appreciate your support. Anyways, this is Engineering Success, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I'm not complaining, nah, I'm not complaining. My thoughts get complicated, I cannot explain in lameness. Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station.